Big tech is a given. It's part of our everyday lives, and we cannot imagine life without it. For better or worse, big tech is integrated into our lives with both obvious outcomes and unintended consequences. In his recent released book, The Venture Alchemist, Rob Lalka takes readers inside big tech's worst exploitations and abuses alongside many good intentions and moral compromises. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what role did big tech play in the January 6th attacks?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And so you have the Stop the Steal groups that are spreading online, right? And Mark Zuckerberg makes the decision to basically shut them down. And so that decision came outside of policy. That was not something that they had a clear policy on why that needed to happen. And it was the fastest growing group in Facebook's history at that point, which is to say it's the fastest growing movement in human history because we've never been connected like this before. And so it grew to be larger than 3/4 of American capital cities in less than 48 hours. And of course, they shut it down. And so it's really interesting when you think about what people are allowed to say or not allowed to say on these platforms.
So how did venture capitalists fuel J.D. Vance's rise to power? And obviously now he's the vice presidential candidate after he changed his name and his political stances.
You got it. So less than a dozen years ago, JD changed his name from JD Hamill to JD Vance. So, it's an interesting move before he becomes famous. We'd have to think about what a Trump Hamill ticket would work like as opposed to Trump Vance. But yeah, it's interesting because Peter Thiel, who was chairing governance of Facebook for that entire time that I was just describing, was also the big donor behind Trump in 2016 with 1.25 million. But he actually gave 17.5 million to JD Vance's U.S. Senate campaign. And so in Silicon Valley, that's called exponential growth. And I find it interesting that you see how much more these folks are getting involved, especially because Thiel's former business partner, of course, Elon Musk, is now saying he's going to give $45 million a month to support the Trump Vance ticket.
And should we continue to trust big tech, believing the apps on our phones are free when our data, the most valuable resource that we have of the 21st century?
Yeah, you got it. I mean, so you've heard the phrase, if you're not paying for the product, you probably are the product, right? Because they're making money somehow. I go a little bit further in my new book by saying, actually, it's also about the data. It's about the content and the data that we're creating. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that that stuff's not valuable, And so if that were actually valued and we were actually sharing the value of that data and that content in a real way, I think it'd be a much different economic situation for most Americans.
Great. And where can we go for more info on the book?
Yeah, anywhere online. It's gotten great reviews. It was the top new book on venture capital on Amazon and top in business ethics as well. So it's a book that's meant to be very easy to read, good stories. I tried to tell them like my grandmother would have told them growing up in Alabama.
Very good. And thanks for joining us. And we'll be sure to post this on our website at dailyflashshow.com.